Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Say It. I am Sarah.
And I am Mike. Sarah, weren't you telling me something earlier?
You know, Mike, I got the idea for today's episode from my coworker telling me about her camping trip this morning.
Oh boy, what happened?
She said the forecast was bad all week, but despite the forecast, they went camping anyway. Although it rained the whole first night, they still had a good time. And in spite of the rain, she said it's actually her favorite trip so far.
Huh, 3 sentences, and none of them are really about the same thing.
Right. Different details every time. But look at the pattern underneath. Something bad was working against her, and the good outcome happened anyway, every single time.
Oh, I see it now. So it's not the words meaning the same thing. It's all 3 doing the same job.
Exactly that. Same job, 3 different words.
So why does English even need 3 words for one job?
It doesn't, really. Not for the meaning. The real difference is grammar, not meaning.
Oh, so it's not which word means what, it's what comes after each one.
That's the whole episode. One question decides almost everything. Full sentence next, or just a noun?
Full sentence, although, noun, despite, or in spite of.
That's the one. By the end of today, you'll hear all 3 and know exactly which one fits. Like and subscribe first. It genuinely helps us.
1 coworker, 1 camping trip, 3 words. Let's go.
One question decides almost everything. And let's actually make sure that question is crystal clear before we go further.
Full sentence or just a noun, right?
That's the one. But let's slow down and really see it. Although needs a full clause after it, a subject and a verb.
Like, although it was raining.
For sure. It was raining is a complete little sentence on its own. Now, despite and in spite of are different. They need a noun or a gerund, never a full clause.
Like, despite the rain.
There it is. The rain is just a noun, no subject, no verb hiding inside it.
So the meaning is genuinely identical, and the only real difference is what's allowed to come right after.
That's genuinely the whole topic in one sentence. There's actually a name for what all 3 of these are doing if you want the fancy version.
Oh, go for it.
It's called concession, contrast plus real surprise. Different from a word like unlike, which is just plain comparison, no surprise involved.
Give me an example of the difference.
Sure. Unlike her brother, Martha prefers to stay home. No surprise there, just a plain difference between 2 people.
Versus, despite being exhausted, she still went for a run.
Right on. That one has real surprise built in. You'd expect exhaustion to stop her, and it didn't.
Okay, that clicks. So concession specifically means the outcome goes against what you'd expect.
That's it exactly. One shared job, concession, and 1 grammar question, full sentence or just a noun.
Man, that's actually a pretty clean way to hold 2 rules in your head at once.
It's exactly why although is the perfect place to start.
The most flexible one, right?
Right on. Although can open a sentence or sit right in the middle. Imagine you and a friend went hiking in bad weather.
Although it was raining, we still went hiking.
That's the one. Now flip the order.
We still went hiking although it was raining.
Same meaning either way. Notice the comma, too. It shows up when although comes first, but disappears when the main idea comes first.
Oh, I see it now. So the comma just marks which half came first.
Exactly that. Small thing, but a lot of learners either always at it or never at it.
Good to know. Is although basically the safest choice if I've ever unsure which of the three to use?
Pretty much, yeah. Even professional ESL teachers admit they lean on it more than despite or in spite of, just out of habit.
Whoa, so even the teachers have a favorite.
They really do. Now, here's a small but real distinction. Although and even though aren't identical in feeling.
Aren't they interchangeable?
Grammatically, completely. But although feels neutral, just a plain fact. Even though feels stronger, more dramatic.
Give me both. Same situation.
Sure. Although it was raining, we went out. Plain, unremarkable.
Even though it was raining heavily, we still went out.
That's the one. And notice how much more dramatic that feels, even though the grammar's identical.
Okay, that clicks. Same structure, just turned up emotionally. Give me one more. A totally different situation.
Sure. Imagine someone failed a test, but only by 1 point. Although he failed, he was close.
And the even though version?
Even though he studied for weeks, he still failed. Same grammar, but that one lands with real disappointment behind it.
Huh, that makes sense. So even though basically turns up the emotional volume, no matter what the actual situation is.
Exactly. One more, and this one's genuinely fun. Though can do everything although can do, but it has one trick although can't.
What trick?
It can sit at the very end of a sentence. Imagine reviewing a movie you didn't love.
I thought it was too long, though.
Nailed it. And notice how that feels almost like a softer version of but tacked on after the fact.
Give me another one, something more everyday.
Sure. Imagine your friend asks how a job interview went. It went fine. I was pretty nervous, though.
Oh, so it's basically dropping in a small, honest correction right at the end.
That's the one. Not announced up front, just added on, almost casually.
I use that constantly and never thought about what it was actually doing.
Most people don't. One last fun fact, and there's no real explanation for this one beyond convention.
Go on.
You'll hear even though constantly. You will never hear even although.
Get out of here, seriously? Never?
Never. Just one of those fixed English pairings, no logic behind it.
Classic English, honestly. Plenty of rules like that.
Position flexibility, the although versus even though intensity, and those end of sentence trick.
Boom, that's it. Althoug's got some real personality once you actually look at it.
And now let's go back to my neighbor sentence from the very start.
Although he was broke, but he still tipped generously?
That's the one. Can you actually spot what's wrong now?
Although and but are both in there, doing kind of the same job.
Right on. Although already announces the contrast on its own. Adding but says the same thing twice.
So it's just repetitive, like saying something twice for no reason.
It's actually worse than that, honestly. Although is a subordinating conjunction, and but is a coordinating one. When both try to link the same two ideas, the sentence loses its main clause entirely.
Wait, really? So it's not just redundant, it's actually broken?
Genuinely broken structurally. There's no complete standalone sentence left anywhere in there once both are fighting for the same job.
Okay, that clicks. So what's the actual fix? Pick one or the other.
Exactly. Either, although he was broke, he still tipped generously, or he was broke, but he still tipped generously. Never both.
Got it. Is there anything else different between those two fixed versions?
Actually, yes, something genuinely elegant. Although can move around. The contrast can come first, or the main idea can come first. Same meaning either way.
Like we saw earlier with the hiking example.
Right. But only ever runs one direction. The expected fact always comes first, and the surprise always comes second.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. He was mentioned in the article, but his name was spelled wrong. You'd never flip that around and say his name was spelled wrong, but he was mentioned in the article.
Huh, that sounds genuinely broken if you flip it.
It really does. Although flexible about direction, but isn't ever.
There it is. So the trap isn't just don't use both. It's actually two real grammar facts hiding in one mistake.
That's it, exactly. Redundant, structurally broken, and directionally different. 3 real problems in one small sentence.
Nailed it. Your neighbor had no idea he was breaking English that badly.
And now let's meet the 2 cousins that would have fixed his sentence differently. Despite and in spite of.
The ones that take a noun instead of a full sentence?
That's the one. Imagine the same hiking trip, but describing it with despite instead.
Despite the rain, we still went hiking.
Right on. Notice, no subject, no verb after despite, just a noun, the rain.
And in spite of works the same way?
Exactly the same job. In spite of the rain, we still went hiking.
So despite and in spite of are basically interchangeable, just different lengths.
Pretty much, yeah. We'll get into the small differences later. But first, the single most common mistake connected to these 2.
Go for it.
Despite of the rain. Adding of after despite.
Wait, really? That sounds fine to me, honestly.
It sounds fine to a lot of people, and that's exactly why it's such a common error. Despite never takes of. Only in spite of does.
Huh. So despite is one word, no of, and in spite of is 3 words, always with of.
That's it exactly. Say them both out loud, and you'll actually feel the rhythm difference.
Despite the rain, in spite of the rain. Yeah, I feel it now.
There it is. Second real mistake, and it travels with the first one constantly, using a full clause after despite, like it's although.
Like what?
Despite she was tired, she kept working. That's wrong, because she was tired is a full clause, subject and verb.
So what's the fix? Turn it into a noun somehow?
Exactly. Strip the subject, turn the verb into a gerund. Despite being tired, she kept working.
Okay, that clicks. Give me one more, just to lock in the pattern.
Sure. In spite of she grew up poor, she became successful. Wrong. In spite of growing up poor, she became successful. Right.
Same fix both times. Subject gone, verb turned into an ing form.
Every time. One more small trap while we're here. Some learners use to instead of the gerund.
Like how?
Despite to try hard, he failed. Wrong. It needs the gerund. Despite trying hard, he failed.
Got it. Gerund only, never the infinitive.
Right. Last thing, a genuine escape hatch if you really need a full clause after despite or in spite of.
There's an actual way around it?
There is. Add the fact that before the clause. Despite the fact that it was raining, we went hiking.
Oh, I see it now. So the fact that turns the clause into something that behaves like a noun.
Exactly. And it's one fixed phrase, all 4 words together. You can't drop that partway through.
Classic English, another one of those fixed chunks you just have to memorize.
the despite of error, the full clause mistake, the infinitive trap, and the fact bat escape hatch.
4 real traps, 1 pair of words.
Now, let's actually look at the small differences between that pair.
I thought you said they were basically interchangeable.
They mostly are, grammatically, but there's a genuinely fun reason spite is even in there in the first place.
What do you mean?
Spite, on its own, still means malice, wanting to hurt someone. Imagine a coworker got passed over for a promotion, and afterward, she stopped helping the team on purpose.
She did it out of spite.
Wait, really? So despite and in spite of have anger hiding inside them?
Historically, yes, but not anymore. In modern English, they're fully neutral, no anger implied at all.
Huh. That's a strange word to build a neutral phrase out of.
It really is. Give me one more just so it sticks. There's actually an old idiom, too. Cutting off your nose to spite your face.
What does that even mean?
Acting out of anger in a way that ends up hurting yourself, too. Like refusing to attend a friend's wedding just to punish them, even though you actually wanted to go.
Okay, that clicks. So spite on its own is still genuinely about anger, even though despite and in spite of left that meaning behind completely.
Exactly right. But here's the fun part. Some language experts say in spite of can still feel a tiny bit more defiant than despite, just because it keeps the word spite fully visible.
Give me an example of that feeling.
Sure. She played despite her injury. Sounds like a calm, practical decision.
She played in spite of her injury. Sounds like she's almost daring the injury to stop her.
That's the one. Same grammar, slightly different attitude underneath.
Okay, that clicks. So it's not a hard rule, more like a feeling some people notice.
Exactly. Worth knowing, not worth stressing over. One more real difference, this time about formality. Despite is the everyday common choice.
And in spite of?
Slightly more formal, though still totally normal in speech. Imagine texting a friend versus writing a business email.
Give me both versions.
Texting a friend, despite the traffic, I made it on time. Business email, in spite of the delay, the project was completed on schedule.
Oh, I see it now. Same job, but the email version just feels a notch more polished.
There it is. Good to know. Is there a fixed phrase that actually prefers in spite of specifically?
There is, actually. In spite of himself, or herself, or oneself. It means someone did something even though they didn't want to or expect to.
Give me a real one.
Luna cried in spite of herself. She didn't want to cry, didn't expect to, and it happened anyway.
Oh, so that phrase is basically against my own will, and it specifically wants in spite of, not despite.
That's it exactly. The spite trap, the defiance nuance, the formality difference, and the himself idiom.
Boom, that's it. 2 words, 1 meaning, just slightly different texture.
Hey, let's climb one step higher on the formality ladder.
Okay, higher than in spite of?
Much higher. Notwithstanding. You'll almost never hear this in casual conversation.
Where would you actually see it then?
Legal documents, formal policy writing, academic papers. Imagine a contract clause.
Notwithstanding anything to the contrary.
That's the one. And that specific phrase means this clause overrides any conflicting clause elsewhere in the document.
Whoa, so it's not just fancy, it's doing a real legal job.
It genuinely is. But here's the fun part, and this is a real trick none of the other 3 words can do.
What's that?
Notwithstanding can go after the noun, not just before it. Imagine a parade happening despite bad weather.
The rain notwithstanding, the parade drew thousands.
Right on. Notice rain comes first, notwithstanding comes right after it. You could never do that with despite or although.
Give me one more just to see the pattern again.
Sure. Imagine someone being rude to you and you're choosing to stay calm anyway.
Your rudeness notwithstanding, I remain civil.
There it is. Same trick, noun first, notwithstanding right after.
Okay, that clicks. So it's genuinely got its own move, not just a fancier synonym.
Exactly. One honest note, though, before we move on. Even lawyers are trying to retire this word.
Wait, really? The word built for legal writing?
Genuinely, yes. Canada's own Department of Justice actually recommends using plain despite instead, for clarity.
Huh. So even the professionals think despite gets the job done just fine.
Pretty much. And one fun little detail before we close this out. Other languages have their own version of exactly this word. French uses nonobstant. Spanish uses no obstante.
That's rough. Wait, that's actually really cool, not rough at all.
Same idea, 3 languages. The postposition trick, the legal phrase, and even the lawyers softening on it.
Nailed it. Notwithstanding, officially the fanciest word in the family.
Now, let's actually put all 3, although versus despite versus in spite of, side by side, so the real difference finally lands.
Using the same situation each time?
Exactly that. Imagine someone lost their job last month, and they're doing okay anyway.
Let's start with although.
Although he lost his job, he's doing okay.
Full clause after although, subject and verb. He lost his job.
Right on. Now, despite. Same situation.
Despite losing his job, he's doing okay.
That's the one. Notice he lost became losing, a gerund, no subject anywhere.
And in spite of?
In spite of losing his job, he's doing okay.
Same conversion, same gerund, just 3 words instead of 1.
Okay, that clicks. Now here's the part that really locks it in. Let's try the wrong versions too.
On purpose?
On purpose. What happens if you use despite but keep the full clause?
Despite he lost his job, he's doing okay. That sounds broken.
It is broken. That's the mistake we covered earlier, showing up again in a new sentence. What about the opposite, although with just a noun?
Although losing his job, he's doing okay. Huh, that sounds wrong too, but I can't fully explain why.
Because although specifically needs a subject and a verb, a gerund alone isn't a full clause, so it doesn't fit.
Oh, I see it now. So each wrong version is really just borrowing the other word's grammar by mistake.
That's it exactly. Let's do one more full round. Different situation completely. Imagine a small restaurant surviving a slow year.
Although business was slow, the restaurant survived.
Right. Full clause. Despite version?
Despite a slow year, the restaurant survived.
Noun this time. A slow year. No conversion even needed. And in spite of?
In spite of a slow year, the restaurant survived.
Same noun, just the longer form. Now, quick wrong version for fun. What if someone said, in spite of business was slow?
Wait, really? That's wrong too, right? Full clause again, where a noun should be.
Exactly. And now you're catching these on your own. Same job, 3 grammar shapes, and 2 genuine ways to get it wrong.
Boom, that's it. I actually feel like I could hear these mistakes now out in the wild.
And before we move on, let's do a quick bonus round.
Quick, meaning we're not teaching these the same way?
Right, just enough so you recognize them when they show up. First, albeit. It's actually a fossilized version of although it be, all fused into one word.
Whoa, that's a strange history for one small word.
It really is. And it works differently, too. It introduces a short phrase, not a full sentence. She was tired, albeit happy.
Break that down a bit more.
Albeit isn't taking a full clause like although. It's not a bare noun like despite either.
So what is it doing exactly?
Just adding one quick, honest qualifier onto something you already said. Tired is the main fact, albeit happy is the small addition right after it.
Oh, so it's basically saying, here's a small exception in the fewest words possible.
That's it exactly. Next, however. Similar job, totally different punctuation. The weather was terrible, however, we went out.
Give me the actual difference from although.
Although joins two clauses in one sentence. However connects two separate, already finished sentences.
So the punctuation actually matters here.
It really does. A lot of people join them with just a comma. The weather was terrible, however, we went out. And that's a real named error, a comma splice.
So it needs a period or a semicolon instead, never just a comma.
Right on, exactly that. Next one, regardless of. This one actually means something genuinely different, not just another synonym.
How so?
Despite and in spite of both admit the thing was a real obstacle.
And regardless of?
Means it simply doesn't matter either way. The event will proceed despite the bad weather, admits the weather's bad, and frames continuing as overcoming it.
Versus?
The event will proceed regardless of the weather. The weather was never really a factor, good or bad.
That makes sense. So regardless of is almost more indifferent, and despite is more like pushing through something.
Exactly right. Last one, quick. While versus whereas. Whereas is formal, putting two facts in direct contrast.
Give me one.
The north is temperate, whereas the south is tropical. Clean, no ambiguity there.
And while?
More casual, but genuinely ambiguous sometimes. While Tom studied engineering, his sister opened a bakery.
Ambiguous how?
That could just mean they were doing these things during the same period of time, or it could mean a real contrast between their two paths.
Wait, really? You genuinely can't always tell which one it is?
Genuinely can't. Sometimes only context tells you. Albeit, however, regardless of, and while versus whereas.
There you go. 4 more words to recognize, even if today wasn't really about them.
Now, let's actually test ourselves before the role play.
Quiz time. I'm ready.
Same as always. I give you a sentence with a blank. You fill it in and explain why. Then we switch.
Let's go. Hit me first.
Blank, it was raining. We still went hiking.
Although, there's a full clause after it. It was raining. Subject and verb.
That's the one. My turn to answer yours.
Okay, blank the rain, we still went hiking.
Despite or in spite of, either works. It's just a noun there, no clause.
Right on, both correct. My turn again. He was tired, blank he kept working. Spot the actual mistake first.
Wait, this one already has but in it, right? So adding although would be the trap.
Exactly, you caught it. What's the fix?
Pick one. Although he was tired, he kept working, or he was tired, but he kept working.
Okay, that clicks. Your turn again.
Blank of the rain.
In spite. And the classic mistake would be adding of after despite instead. Despite never takes of.
There it is. Last one. And this one's about Notwithstanding's postposition trick. Your rudeness, blank, I remain civil.
Notwithstanding, right after rudeness. It's the only one of our words that can sit after the noun like that.
Nailed it. 5 for 5 again.
I think I actually caught the although but trap on my own that time.
And now let's hear all of this working together in one real conversation.
Let's do it.
The scenario: 2 coworkers catching up after a rough product launch. Hey, how'd the launch go? I heard it was chaos right up until the end.
It really was. Although the server crashed twice, we still hit our deadline.
Whoa, seriously? Twice?
Twice. Despite all that, the client actually loved the final product.
That's honestly impressive. And the team held up okay?
Mostly, in spite of working through the whole weekend, everyone showed up Monday in a good mood.
Huh, that's not what I expected after a weekend like that.
Same, honestly. Although he was exhausted, our lead engineer still ran the client demo himself.
That's dedication. Was there anything that actually went wrong, though?
One thing, regardless of how the launch went, marketing was already planning the next campaign.
Oh, I see it now. So regardless of there just means it didn't matter either way, good launch or bad?
Exactly. They were moving forward no matter what. Anyway, notwithstanding the chaos, I'd call it a win.
There it is, and that's notwithstanding actually earning its spot in a real sentence.
Let's pause there and break this down properly.
Good idea. First one, although the server crashed twice.
Full clause after it, subject and verb, and notice it's a fact getting a full sentence of its own weight, not just a quick mention.
Right. And despite all that,
That's compressing the whole crash story into one noun phrase, all that, instead of repeating it.
so despite is doing real work there, summarizing something already said.
Exactly. In spite of working through a whole weekend.
That's a gerund converted from what would have been we worked through the weekend.
Right, and it's carrying real weight too. Working through a whole weekend and still showing up in a good mood. That's the surprise the sentence is built around.
Regardless of how the launch went.
The genuinely different one. It's not admitting an obstacle at all. It's saying the launch's outcome was never actually the deciding factor.
So marketing's plans existed either way, success or failure.
Exactly that. And notwithstanding the chaos.
The formal cousin, sitting right after the noun for that little flourish, doing the exact same job despite and although could have done, just dressed up.
5 different words, 5 different jobs, one real conversation.
Boom, that's it. That's genuinely the whole episode right there. There is one more thing worth mentioning before we go.
What's that?
This exact grammar shows up in some of the most quoted writing in history. People describing hope, surviving even the worst circumstances, almost always reach for in spite of or despite to say it.
Huh, that makes sense. It's built for exactly that kind of moment, an obstacle and something good happening anyway.
Okay, let's lock in the recap. Although needs a full clause. Despite and in spite of need a noun or gerund.
Never combine although with but, and despite never takes of.
So here's your practice for today. Write one although, despite, or in spite of sentence in the comments. Something true about your own week.
We read every single one.
And if you liked today's one grammar question approach, check out our episode on because of, and due to. Same idea, different question, why instead of despite what.
Those two pair perfectly together.
Subscribe to Say It if you haven't already.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.